You know, this is the second president that I've had the opportunity to be the MC for kind of his going away evening. The last one didn't go so well, so let's hope tonight goes a little bit better. Dan is the 9th president in the history of Bethany. So when you think of the history of Bethany, and only 9 people over the course of the entire history of this institution have had the opportunity to sit in the office at the end of the hallway. And so it's obviously a very, very distinguished group. And certainly Dan fits well into that category. And so the opportunity that I've had to work with him for 12 and a half years has certainly been a pleasure. I think it's kind of interesting that you'll see the signs on the back of the chairs over here. It says family and friends, and I'm kind of wondering where the rest of us fit in. I know there's been times when Dan has put me in a different category, but this might be too much. So, you know, Dan called me this afternoon and he said, I understand you're going to be the MC tonight. And I said, yeah, that is correct. And he said, just remember, it's about me. And so for many years, he's reminded me of a lot of things, and I've always tried to follow those directions. You know, I've been with Dan in planes, trains, boats, and automobiles. Wasn't there a movie like that somewhere along the line? Some of us are old enough to remember that. We have a number of people that are going to address you tonight, people that have worked with Dan in various capacities during his time here, and we want to make sure that they have a great opportunity to express, you know, their gratitude to Dan and talk about the time that they spent here on our campus and working with Dan, either on campus or in the community. First of those is Steve Yeager. I've known Steve for a long time. We had an opportunity to go to high school together. Remember when Steve called me when he was offered the position here and asked me what I thought of Bethany and whether he should come or not, and for good or bad, he came and was here a long time in various capacities. He's here tonight representing the administration. Steve was on the cabinet Dan's entire tenure here until he retired. Dan's retiring. I'm still here, and we'll see how long that lasts too, especially after tonight. So at this time, if Steve Yeager, if you would come forward.
Now I got to raise this up and, well, thank you, Art. Well, to all of you, friends of Bethany, faculty, staff, it's really an honor, Dan and Kathy and family, to be here to speak about the administration and our feelings about the work that we've shared together. Dan and I have known each other a long time. Now, aside from those of you over here that are family, okay, you're not in this vote. How many knew Dan before 1971? Okay, a couple of them. Well, in 1971, Dan came to Bethany as a college freshman. I was his RA. Checked him into his dorm room, and we've stayed in touch for many of these years. Now, as Dan's RA, I would have known Dan, the college freshman. So, Dan, the college freshman, wouldn't this be a perfect time to tell some Dan stories? Just families going, oh, no. Well, I just don't have anything on this guy. And so there'll be no Dan stories. He's the same kind, even-tempered, strong Christian man that I've always known. And so what I have done, however, is compiled what I would call a top 10 list. And this came from a consensus of the current and past cabinet members. And they shared with me what they felt over the years were Dan's strengths and his leadership ability, and I'd like to share those at this time. And there was quite a bit of consensus, Dan, that the group was impressed with how well you understood the numerous details that had to be considered in so many important decisions. If you've never been in that situation, you wouldn't know how much homework you have to do to get ready to hold a cabinet meeting. And Dan was definitely had attention to details. You had a good sense of how to navigate through sensitive matters. I'm not going to go into details on those, but we know we had many a sensitive issue that would come up, and you navigated that so well. You had a good mind for finances, and we know how vital that's been over the last years. A good ambassador for the college. That came up time and time again by the people on the cabinet. You were a good listener. You allowed us to bring our ideas and share them with you. You were very patient, and every once in a while you actually agreed with us on them too, so that was really cool. You allowed the cabinet to be involved. Many mentioned the fact that one of them was a coach, some were advisors to clubs, some were really active in the community, involved in service clubs, one that was very involved in the MSU hockey broadcasts. So many opportunities to be involved and share the Bethany story with others. This one's for Dan and Kathy. The vision for international education. Clearly, with study abroad, the programs that were put together for exchanges, you really brought that vision of international education to Bethany. In fact, one of the cabinet members said he walked into your office a couple years ago and he said, "Hey, you want to go to China?" Where'd that come from? Well, he found out very quickly what Dan had in mind. Dan, you gave Bethany a 4-year baccalaureate perspective, and as you know, we had very few majors when things got rolling here. And it wasn't just the number of majors, but it was also the understanding of what it took to run a 4-year college, and that was clearly brought out by the members of the cabinet. And along with that, as a consultant evaluator for the Higher Learning Commission, you definitely gave the college some great insights into what we had to do here to prepare for those visits. And it was clear that in this last visit that a lot of things had come forward in a very positive way, and you had a lot to do with that. Dan and Kathy, this came up many times, your willingness to host numerous guests at your house. And there had to be days when you were tired of being nice and just wanted to go home and crash. But you'd open up 128 West Glencrest, and people were there for many different events. I asked Lynn Merseth, Dan's right-hand person over these years, to do some research to find out over a year's time how many people darkened the door of 128 West Glencrest. And the official events, there were 17 official events, over 600 guests in their house. Student groups, faculty, staff, administration, Board of Regents, Heritage Society, members of the ELS, just numerous activities. And then the occasions that we had some unofficial gatherings, some administrative retreats, times when Dan and Kathy would put out some food and say, you know, we're going to meet and we want you to stick around and let's talk and find ways to improve Bethany, and those were great times. And sometimes administrators needed to decompress, and so that would be another time when we'd be invited over to Glencrest. In fact, I didn't mention this, but somewhere in here there was, oh yeah, Dan makes a good old-fashioned. I think that's what it says. Sometimes it's hard to read Art's handwriting. But I think I got that on. Told you. Okay, I want to wrap this up. Dan, I personally feel so blessed to have known you these years and the opportunity for our paths to cross. It's truly been a blessing for me. As you can imagine, Dan and I didn't always agree. And there were times when that was probably good, because in the end, the right decision was probably made because we mulled it over, we talked about it, and it's okay to agree to disagree. But what I always appreciated was that it didn't affect our relationship, our working relationship. And that's not only a sign of a true professional, but also of a wonderful Christian friend. Dan, thank you. Kathy, you're going to enjoy retirement when the time comes. Lois and I highly recommend it. It's really a good gig. And going forward, we wish you all the best and God's blessings to you. Thank you.
I don't think anybody else will need that, Steve. You know, I never got asked to go to China. Now, how many meetings were there at the Bruss house? Where is that house? If there's a guest book, I'll bet my name's not in it. Thanks for your comments, Steve. You know, as we were preparing for this evening, you know, obviously, throughout Dan's tenure, he and I have had a lot of opportunities to interact with alums. So I thought it would be kind of nice to send out a request to our alums and ask them to send their greetings. As I sent out, we're having this retirement thing for President Bruss, and would you care to send some comments that maybe I could pass on to the group that evening? And so I just thought I'd share a couple of them with you. The first one was Dan who? The second one was, what does he do? And the third one was, he's still there? Now, I'm not sure where this one came from, but when did Marv leave? And then, who's going to direct the band? Needless to say, Dan has had a tremendous impact on our alums and the people that he's had the opportunity to interact with during these times, as evidenced by those comments that were very kindly sent to me. Our next speaker is Jonathan Zierdt. Jonathan is the president and CEO of Greater Mankato Growth, where he's had opportunities to work with Dan in Dan's role in our community and very involved in the community. So with that, I will turn it over to Jonathan.
Well, to all of you, thank you for being here today, and Dan, to you and your family, I'm humbled to be able to have the opportunity to make some remarks today. As Steve referenced, your role as an ambassador for the college and into the community, to bringing Bethany as a part of the Greater Mankato community. That's something I've been able to witness firsthand very frequently as I've gotten to know Dan over the years and worked with him. He's served on our board of directors. He's led the Southern Minnesota Advocates, which are a few of you in the room today. And he's been a participant in our Cities and Colleges Universities Partnership program with his colleagues that lead other universities and colleges in the community, our city leadership, our school leadership, and our business community leadership. And so I've had a variety of different venues in which I've had an opportunity to work with Dan, and that has been to my sheer delight. When I sat back and thought about what is it I would want to convey to you today about sort of my observations about Dan or my experiences with him, the first thing that happened to me was I was flooded with a variety of words that came to my mind. Things like his ability to engage others, compassionate, patient, definitive when he needed to be, and a steady leader. So I was thinking about this word compassionate, and it reminded me of a number of times when Dan's been with me on my various journeys medically. One time when I was here doing some strategic work with the college, how he and his team catered to my every need when I just recovered from a knee surgery, and I wasn't getting around very well, but I showed up to still do the work, but Dan made sure I was comfortable and that didn't get in our way, and it didn't become something I was self-conscious of, and I was able to go about my work. And that kind of compassion is just something that comes really naturally for Dan. And this leadership notion, there are a number of passages that I've come across over the number of years that caused me to think about this leadership piece. And as we were chatting earlier, one of these really strikes home with how I know you're feeling about today, right? So a couple of years ago, I read an article that talked about a fellow by the name of John Gardner. Some of you might know him. He was a legendary public intellectual and a civic reformer. He was a Stanford professor, and he's often referred to as the architect of the Great Society under President Lyndon Johnson. But he gave a speech in 1990 at the age of 77. The age of 77, in November of 1990, he talked to a company called McKinsey & Company, and he was talking about the importance of leaders to commit themselves to continual learning and growing. He said this: be interested. Everyone wants to be interesting, but the vitalizing thing is to be interested. As the proverb says, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. 1990. Right? So, as I was remarking to Ginger last evening, who sends her regrets she wasn't able to be here tonight, but as we were talking about some of my remarks, I said, do you remember the night we went to the dinner theater at Bethany? I think it was the first time. We had a little dinner theater in the Fine Arts Building. And so I'm trying to have a conversation with Dan. I'm all business all the time, right? But Dan kept sort of pushing me aside, and he kept wanting to talk to Ginger about her trip to China. She had just returned from China, and he was so interested in that trip, just kept asking her questions. Interested. It was less about being interesting. It was more about him being interested. And then I saw this quote just the other day when I was looking up John Gardner. I was trying to find the quote again. I had it in another location. But I ran across this quote that also talks about it. It's a guy by the name of Mark Goulston, and he's a psychiatrist, an author, and a consultant. And he said this, and this is why I know you're feeling the way you are today. The measure of self-assurance is how deeply and sincerely interested you are in others. The measure of insecurity is how much you try to impress them with you. You didn't say this is about me to Art, because you wouldn't do that, right? This is, you're interested in others. One of the most humble individuals that I've ever met, and a steady leader. And so this struck me as I thought about Dan's leadership. I'm in a Friday morning fellowship group with 5 other men. And as we go studying the Word and the Bible, we also pull up various books from time to time. And one that we're currently studying is a book called 12 Ordinary Men. And it's a profile or a look at each of the 12 disciples, which we had no idea such a book existed. Right? But we've dug into this book. And inside of this book, there's a focus that starts with Peter, who was really the leader of the disciples. And in this book it says, we see in Peter's life 3 key elements that go into making a true leader: the right raw materials, the right life experiences, and the right character qualities. Now, as a chemist, I know you appreciate the combination of the right elements together. But he said those are the 3 key elements. If we could do a periodic table, 3 key elements that go into making a true leader: the right raw material, the right life experiences, the right character qualities. And within the right raw materials, there are character elements that you'll find that can't be developed by training, but they were innate features that were part of Peter's temperament. The first one, inquisitiveness. Interested. Asking questions, wanting to know more about others, about a situation. The second necessary ingredient, initiative, drive, ambition, energy. Dan exudes that. And the third one, involvement. You'll always find leaders in the middle of the action. Their hands in it, their sleeves rolled up, ready to go to work. When I read about those raw ingredients, and those 3 features that are exuded by Peter, I can't help but think of Dan Bruss. Dan, this community is grateful for what you've done, for the leadership you've shown, for the participation you've had in it, not just with Bethany, but outside of Bethany, how you've made Bethany a part of Greater Mankato community, how the students that are here have become part of the Greater Mankato community. We thank you for that. You've been an exceptional role model for me as well as many others. You've been a trusted colleague and a dear friend. And I am going to personally miss interacting with you in this role. But Ginger and I look forward to interacting with you and Kathy in the future in other ways. Blessings to you and to your family. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Jonathan. I know I can relate to that feeling about being pushed aside. It was somewhat routine as we worked together. You know, there's probably a lot of things that many of you don't know about Dan, and one of them was that at one time he was taking classes in the seminary, and evidently that didn't go so well either. You know, I do know that my trips to Wisconsin will be shorter now, that I'll be traveling with a different person, because every time Dan and I returned, sometimes on the way down and on the way back, we had to stop at this place called Carr Valley Cheese. And when the people, they recognized, you know, it's like Norm in Cheers. When Dan walked in, they knew it was Dan. And so he would load up with cheese and inevitably say, oh, Kathy's going to kill me. Kathy's going to kill me for bringing all this cheese home. So we'll avoid that. And I don't want to tell a lot of stories, but there's one particular story about a time when we stopped at Carr Valley Cheese, and it happened to be a Friday late afternoon in Wisconsin. For those of us Wisconsinites, we know what happens on Friday late afternoons, early evening, and it's a fish fry. And so Dan asked the lady that waited on us, so if you were going to go for fish tonight, where would you go? And she said, you don't want to go where I would go. And we were kind of dressed like, actually we were kind of dressed like all the guest speakers tonight. And Dan said, well, why don't you just try us? So she gave us directions to this place. So picture this, college president, development guy, and we're now on our way to a city called Hustler, Wisconsin. Fortunately, we had Dan's car. There was no Bethany logo on the side of the car. And the place we're going to eat is called the Hooter Bowl. The Hooter Bowl was an elementary school that had closed, and the locals had turned it into a bowling alley / restaurant. And so the place where we ate was in a classroom, and they had the menu written on the blackboard. We walked in, and the guy said, you're probably not from around here, are you? Anyways, I said to Dan that night, I suspect there hasn't been too many college presidents and development people in here recently, but again, I think that speaks to Dan's roots and the kind of person he is, that where some of the places, well, I won't talk about some of the other places we've eaten over the years, but at this time it's a pleasure to introduce Lyle Fahning, who is representing the Board of Regents here, obviously worked with Dan on a completely different level. So, Lyle.
Thank you, Art. One of the problems with being later in the program is that all of your materials have already been used. So I'll throw this page away. It's been my privilege to have known and worked with Dan. And this was the difficulty. Do I call him President Bruss, or do I call him Dan? Now, I always call him Dan, but President Bruss seemed like the appropriate thing to say, so I'll just, maybe I'll go with President Dan. How's that? But I've known him for 12 years in numerous ways, through the Board of Regents, through the Minnesota Private College Council, and also through the Schwann Foundation. Unfortunately, over that time, I didn't have a chance to travel extensively with him as Art has. And so therefore, I've only heard the rumors of his affinity for Friday night fish fries and cheese curds through Art. But I have been to the president's house, so just to let you know that I have been there. Art, though, who has traveled with Dan on numerous occasions now, has been exposed to these delicacies and prefers them to, well, slightly more than lutefisk. So he's become quite akin to them. Recently, I read a blog regarding successful organizations. And it referenced, as an example, the three most important factors that affect the price of real estate. Many of us have heard that. It's location, location, location. It also stated that the three most important factors in the health and success of organizations are leadership, leadership, and leadership. It also went on to state that the job of an effective leader is to keep everybody uncomfortable 10% of the time. Now, I know there may be a number of members of the administration, faculty, and maybe even the Board of Regents that feel that Dan was very successful in exceeding that 10%. Another saying that I've used is that a leader is someone who can take people to a place they didn't know they needed to go. And Dan, I think, has been excellent at providing that kind of leadership. He has definitely been a leader at Bethany Lutheran College. He was faced with a daunting task as he led the college through what I refer to as a perfect storm, which had been brewing prior to his arrival on campus. That storm consisted in the convergence of three critical elements. His tenure began with a significant reduction of over 50% in the funding resources previously available to the college. This led to difficult but necessary decisions, including selling the retreat center. Secondly, the national demographics of students available to go to college were on a decline, which affected the enrollment numbers, tuition, and ultimately budget deficits. And finally, the worst recession since 1929 impacted the endowments of the college, as well as the support from parents and alumni whose investment portfolios were dramatically impacted. During his 12 years, President Bruss not only faced these issues and their implications of a perfect storm, but he provided leadership in developing additional majors, now culminating in 20 majors, 21 minors, and 8 pre-professional programs. And also during that period, a few minor things like 2 major building programs, a major capital campaign, and numerous other projects and accomplishments. These were many of the visible accomplishments, but more importantly, there continued to be a strong commitment and priority on the one thing needful. This was evidenced in several ways. The Higher Learning Commission, as was mentioned before, and as we as the board hear feedback, many times over the years that they visited, they would mention that Bethany would stand out as an institution where people really knew the mission of the college and could state not only the one thing needful, but could explain what it meant. In addition, the religion classes, Bible studies, baptisms, and confirmations occurring on campus demonstrated that everyone at Bethany is making sure that an education lasts beyond a lifetime and that it is provided to all who are at Bethany. And finally, the caring environment. I didn't really understand it until I'd been involved with the Board of Regents for a number of years. But this happens not only in the classrooms and in the dorms, but throughout the campus. Recently, I learned about a local family whose daughter had attended a public university out of town and was very disappointed in her first year, not only the academics, but the environment that she was exposed to. And she came to Bethany to learn about the education she could receive and was really impressed with the educational opportunities, but also all the people that she met as she talked to the faculty and the administration. And as she and her parents were standing out in the grounds, just kind of taking everything in and looking at the buildings and the campus, someone from the grounds crew shut off their lawnmower and walked over and asked if he could be of help. Now that's a caring campus and caring institution. Everyone on this campus understands and supports our motto, but it can be affected by the support or lack of support from leadership. President Bruss has excelled in making sure that the one thing needful remains our primary focus. Finally, President Bruss and Kathy have seen the changing demographics in our country and the world. This leads to many challenges, but also to huge opportunities. Together, through the Minnesota Private College Council and their efforts, Bethany has provided international exposure opportunities to our students and faculty. In addition, it has allowed students from other countries who don't know what the Bible is, or have never even heard of the Pope, they've been given a chance to learn about the one thing needful. In recognition of these international efforts, the Bethany Board of Regents has established the Dan and Kathy Bruss International Faculty Experience Fund to allow faculty to study abroad and learn more about the different countries and cultures that their students will likely be experiencing during their careers and their lifetimes. And now, on behalf of the Board of Regents, I would like to thank you, Dan, for your dedication, for your work in leading Bethany, and wish you the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Lyle. I'm not going to make any comments on anything a Board of Regents said. I've learned that lesson, too. We have some talented people in our office, and as we probably didn't get a lot of work done the last couple afternoons as we were trying to prepare for this because everybody had ideas. And so the idea of we have to do a top 10 list. And so some of the creative people in our offices came up with the top 10 reasons Dan Bruss is retiring. Number 10, Kathy told him to. Number 9, he wants to be the president of a cheese factory. Number 8, he found out that Jethro Tull was doing a farewell tour and we're looking for a really smart cowbell ringer. Dan will appreciate that one. He's tired of traveling with Art Westphal. Obviously, I didn't write these. His office, number 6, his office is next to Daniel Mundall. Number 5, after missing multiple appointments with top donors and blaming it on that stupid calendar feature on his smartphone, he decided it was time to leave the technology to the new guy. Number 4, he really wanted to get his picture on the cover of the Bethany magazine. Number 3, he figured that retiring might give him a few more hours to volunteer at the Bethany booth at the State Fair. One of Dan's all-time favorites. Number 2, he's ready to tweet and post for the first time hashtag retired BLC Press. And number 1, the patent infringement allegations have been cleared and the royalty checks from that botched chemistry experiment, which resulted in inventing silly putty, are now paying the bills. And that leads us right into our faculty representative, Bill Bukowski.
You never know who is going to take your stuff or steal your material. But there's always questions about what is the president planning to do now that he's leaving. And so the idea is, now what, Dan? And on my way up today, Lynn Merseth gave me some phone calls for Dan that he didn't answer yet, so I thought I'd share those with you. Donald Trump called, and I can only make out the words running mate. But I'm not sure. Are you going to be jogging, or do you think you could be second in command? Pastone Living called, the Lutheran home. They said no chemistry sets are allowed in the room. Buckingham Palace called. They said, we have enough royal babysitters. I'll try to edit it. I know I'm the fourth guy. And Duck Dynasty called back. They only take applications from men with beards. These are my props. Bethany Lutheran College has always been a small place with a big idea. And the big idea, of course, is the one thing needful, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the history of Bethany is the history of struggle, sacrifice, and joy at the success of the mission. How could a small synod keep a school going for their people? How could a small synod offer a solid liberal arts education and hold to biblical truths? Who would be the right fit to come and work at this small liberal arts junior college and high school? And finally, when it became a baccalaureate conferring college. The presidents of Bethany have all had to be men of personal sacrifice, hard work, and dedication to the one thing needful. Holden Olson, Walter Buzine, Sigurd Jobsacker, Barney Teigen, Raymond Branstead, Theodore Auberg, Norman Holte, Marv Meyer, and now Dan Bruss. I'm going to pause as we applaud to the memory of these presidents. This is truly a list of extraordinary gentlemen united in their goal and vision for the college and for the faculty and students. Dan left Bethany 3 times. I knew him each time he left, so you never know what's going to happen, right? He might be leaving again, you know. Once as a student, once as a faculty member, and now as president. The president's job is a job that demands time, critical thinking, problem solving, fundraising, people managing, and all under the principles of Christian vocation and stewardship. The 2 programs that I've been involved with that have grown under Dan's leadership that I wanted to share with you, besides the nuts and bolts of daily life, are with his interest in the global outreach. I serve on the board called Christ in Media, and I also am a member of, work with the media arts people with the Speechless Film Festival. The Christ in Media Institute is a board that encourages the use of digital media to proclaim the gospel. The Institute has sponsored several conferences at Bethany and at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and it has been truly an international experience. Media professionals, students, faculty, and missionaries and mission board members were able to come together to talk about the needs of the mission and develop ideas, tools, and goals. We've had Lutheran high school students, college students, help with the gospel outreach through cell phone applications, translating and producing Bible illustrated videos, and donors have provided on-site video production with solar-powered video production equipment that we then teach to the missionaries. So it's truly amazing international influences that we can't hope to measure as it goes out. The second one is the International Speechless Film Festival. This festival has brought a very creative vision to Bethany and the Mankato community from all over the world in the past 3 years. Each year, filmmakers from over 20 foreign countries have sent movies to us to screen, to judge, to critique. So we've shared and enjoyed their artistic efforts. They've inspired our students and the community with a vision far beyond these walls. Many filmmakers and film experts have come in person, too, to meet with our students and engage our audience. I found both of these endeavors personally invigorating, refreshing, exciting, and as I said, you can't really measure the influence that this has had through Dan's interest in global outreach with this kind of creativity. Thank you, Dan, for your interest in the world, your dedication to the one thing needful, and your years of service at Bethany Lutheran College. And may God bless your years as you embark on a new adventure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. You know, when Dan announced his retirement, there were people on campus that came to me and said, you know, what's going to happen now? I mean, what is Dan going to be doing on the campus now that he's retired? I said, is he going to be kind of like the acting president? And I said, that's kind of what he's been doing for a long time. He's kind of been acting like a president. You know, retirement means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I came across kind of an interesting definition of retirement. And it said, as you retire, you switch bosses. And you switch from the one who hired you to the one you married. Obviously, Kathy agrees with that. I hope that's not true. You know, Dan is really a music buff, too. And so, as I was thinking about this in his retirement, and there's a couple of songs that I think were groups and Dan's favorite. Bob Dylan was one of them. And for those of us that remember the song, Rolling Stone, how does it feel to be on your own, a complete unknown, on your own with no direction home? And I wonder sometimes if he's on campus, if he's going to drive to Glencrest with no direction home. Or, one of Dan's favorite groups from 1975 was Sugarloaf. And so probably after tonight, we could go by their song, Don't Call Us, We'll Call You. So now it's really a pleasure to invite Robert and Elisabeth to come up here as representatives of the family and have the opportunity to talk about their dad. So please welcome Robert and Elisabeth.
Bethany Lutheran College has had a presence in our home for as long as I can remember. This is where my parents met, and my dad taught long ago. We would even come here for an event now and again, including family reunions. And when the time came for me to choose a college, I too decided I would come to Bethany. I clearly remember when Dad told us he was accepting this position. We were eating dinner one spring evening during my senior year of high school. He said that he and Mom had important news. He told us that he had accepted the call to serve as president of Bethany Lutheran College and would start the following January. Now, as an 18-year-old, I felt like I had made my college decision, and now my parents decided they could not live without me. Of course, it was all about me. But looking back, my parents really did allow me my own Bethany experience, even with them on campus daily. They gave me my space, said hello at chapel or in the halls, but really let me decide how much time I spent at home. With one exception, when I tried to drop multivariable calculus, I got a phone call that very day. My dad had a few things to say. Needless to say, I did not drop the class. Having my dad on campus also provided a few unique experiences. He knew that my husband was interested in asking me out, even before I did. He dressed up as an old woman in a surprise appearance of a Cora Lear's production that I participated in. And there's not many people who can say their official graduation photo includes their dad. Even after graduation, I was able to maintain a unique connection with Bethany because of my dad. While he made it a point not to talk about Bethany business, I was still able to hear about the changes and events happening on campus and was able to return here more often than the average alum. One of our favorite things being to attend daily chapel service. Needless to say, my dad has helped to directly and indirectly impact my life in numerous ways. I realize that a lot of people can say their dad helped shape their future, but I think that this is a unique situation because not only has his work impacted my future, but also the several other students, hundreds, probably thousands of students who have been on campus. And for that reason, among others, I am proud of the work he has done these past 12 and a half years. I'm sad to see him go, as I personally don't do well with change, but am excited for what the future will bring for him and my mom. So thank you, Dad, for the work that you have done at Bethany to help ensure students like myself feel prepared to enter the real world academically, socially, and spiritually. Thank you.
For the longest time, I didn't think that I knew what Dan Bruss, the president of Bethany, was like. To me, I always just thought of him as my dad. For example, I rarely ever ask him about work since I know he's thinking about it all of the time anyway. So instead, we just go watch a silly superhero movie or something. And when I became a student at Bethany, I sort of expected that my perception of my father would change, that I would become much more aware of this official president side of him. But even then, that never proved to be the case. Surprisingly, I thought he acted the same around my new friends at Bethany, who were students here, as he did with my friends in Iowa before he ever became a college president or was ever knew of that possibility. I assumed that there would inevitably be some element of fakiness in his demeanor, that there would be some presidential performance that I would immediately notice, but it wasn't there. He was always friendly with them, but not too friendly in a trying too hard kind of way. He was just genuine. Still, I thought that this must be just because these people were connected to me. This personability and genuineness must just be because I'm his son. It wasn't until last summer that I really realized how wrong I was. My dad and I went on a trip to Montana. We mostly just camped, hiked mountain trails, and visited a couple local microbreweries. But one night we met up with a number of recent young Bethany alums that were living in Bozeman, Montana. And even though that night my dad was working, it didn't feel that much different than the rest of our vacation had. We were just going out for pizza and a beer with some people my dad knew. It was natural. Everyone was comfortable with one another. My dad actually knew these people, and they all knew him. And I thought to myself, this is something special. So I'm still in school. I sometimes think that I've decided to just go to school for eternity. And as a result, it means I've gone to a number of different institutions. And I can think back to all the different college presidents of those institutions, and not a single one of them would I ever imagine myself going out to pizza with, let alone think that I've even talked to them. And as a result, I realized that my experience with my father wasn't a special case. I didn't see some exclusive side of the president just because I was his son. I actually had always known what Dan Bruss, the president of Bethany, was like. He was the same person as my dad. Genuine, caring, thoughtful, personable. What I mean is that the relationships he made with people, even relationships that were a result of his position and work, were always meaningful relationships. He always cared about people, showed an interest in them, and made himself likewise open to them. And in this way, I couldn't imagine my dad doing this job anywhere other than Bethany. I'm sure maintaining all these relationships at this level has to be exhausting, but it's worth it when the institution you work for and the community you work within is likewise committed to maintaining genuine and meaningful relationships. In both the human sense, our relationships among students, faculty, staff, and the community, and in the spiritual sense, our relationship with Christ. Dad, I'm glad you found a place that so well matched the values that you've always embodied for me, and I've always been impressed with what you've done and proud of how you've done it. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert and Elisabeth. I think there's one person that I would just like to recognize for her work in putting this together, and that's Lynn Merseth. She's hiding kind of in the back there, but Lynn, thank you for all the work that you did with us. Now I have to be a little careful. You know, I have to thank Dan for hiring me. You know, I've told the story many times, and some of you, it'll be probably the last time I get the chance to tell this story, that Dan came on campus in January as the president, came to one of our basketball games. The next morning, he called me into the office and suggested there might be something better for me to consider doing. I wasn't sure about the timing of that at the point, or obviously we didn't play very well. I have to share our very first development trip. We were embarking on the capital campaign. And we were really excited. And we headed to southern Wisconsin to see 7 people that we absolutely were convinced loved Bethany. And we were 0 for 7. 0. We didn't talk until we got to La Crosse because neither one of us knew what to say. Little did we know what was ahead of us. I think we were both wondering what we had got ourselves into. It was a most interesting time. But again, I think at that time, Dan's leadership showed. And he was convinced this is going to be okay. This is going to be okay. And obviously, it turned out to be okay. So that was a most interesting trip that we spent. I'm glad we kind of got it behind us. And, I asked Dan this afternoon, I'm going to be introducing you. What do you want me to say? And he gave me a lot of stuff that we don't have time for. And quite honestly, I don't think it was that important. He said, just tell him what a great guy I am and what a great job I've done here at Bethany. So I always do what I'm told. When the president tells me, you heard it. I do want to share something that a very good friend of Bethany sent this to me to share it with you tonight. And I just want to take a couple sentences out of it. When he talked about Dan's time here as president, he said, I think Dan has provided a very steady hand at the helm of Bethany for the past 12 and a half years. And what is most important, he never wavered from the unchangeable theology that Bethany so jealously guards. Adding a whole lot of new initiatives is an accomplishment that I think a lot of people do not appreciate. The reason in this particular case they may not appreciate it is that Dan made it look so easy. The man of the hour.
Thank you all for being here this evening. Thanks to all of you for your very kind and generous words. If I start talking about stories that I have with each one of you, we would be here a very, very long time. So there's no way that I can even begin to share some of the joys, some of the excitement, some of the challenges that we've had over the years. But again, thank you for those words. I want to just for a minute go back to when the board first selected me as president. And what they said they were looking for was somebody to expand the baccalaureate programming culture here on campus. And so when I arrived, we had just had 2 or 3 years of baccalaureate graduations, small classes, hardy pioneers at that point. They just had a handful of majors to choose from. They were in a minority compared to the AA grads that we still had at that point. And so that's what we had when I first came to campus. And so now we have, as you already heard, 20 majors, and we've quadrupled basically the number of baccalaureate graduates, and we no longer offer the AA. And so a lot has happened, certainly during that time. So what is that? What is that to develop that culture? And I think, we all realize early on, it's not just a matter of adding 2 more years. There's a lot more to that. So let me just articulate just a couple of those things. So you have to think about different student life policies. You've got a different clientele now. We've got broader ages, and they're doing different things. More are going to be working, more are going to be living off campus. Certainly, a number of them are going to be married even while they're here on campus, and so you have to be thinking about that. We decided very quickly that we needed to offer some different housing for our students, because for years, for decades, people would graduate from Bethany, get an apartment with their friends from Bethany, and go to MSU. And we needed to break that cycle and encourage them to stay here for 4. And so that's how Edgewood Place came into being. And so that was an exciting thing to be thinking about. We needed to be able to connect faculty with local and professional communities. As an AA institution, you turn that all over to the next group. You don't think about certain things. Now all of a sudden, you're the one that has to worry about, where do our students internship? How do they get a job? How do they get into graduate school? That's all new stuff. And so that was an entirely different thing that people had to think about. It was already mentioned that we need to think about offering study abroad opportunities. And so it was great that Kathy and I had some experience in that. We're able to bring that to the table and to see that blossom. And so we were able to develop some things going on there. Partnerships. Had to think about partnerships in a different way. Not just 2 + 2. So now all of a sudden it had to be different. We were able to start a 3-2 engineering program with the University of Minnesota. It was a whole new way of thinking for us. We developed a relationship with the United International College through the work that we did with the Minnesota Private College Council, and that this fall is going to celebrate 10 years of that relationship. We have another group of Chinese students coming to campus this summer. I think it's the 4th or the 5th one that we'll see. So those are all the kinds of things that we had to be thinking about. And now we're actually looking at a 2 + 2 program, but we're on the other end of it. We're looking at offering a program to community colleges for them to come to Bethany and to complete their programming with us. And there's some exciting things that are going on there. And it's not that they're just coming to complete their degree. In one case in particular, I think they're coming here specifically because we have a really awesome program. And so that's still in its infancy, but that'll be some of the next things that'll be coming. Encouraging faculty to be involved in disciplinary research as well as pedagogical research, and to understand that those two are not mutually exclusive, but they actually feed off of each other and they benefit students in ways that we don't normally think about otherwise. And to see that grow and blossom has been really encouraging. And we needed to be able to convince donors and friends of the college that this change was really important and that their support, financial and otherwise, needed to take place. And Art already alluded to that. We had a rough start. Yes, we did. But in the end, we were blessed, and we had a goal of $28 million, and we were able to raise over 30. And so the support of our alums and our friends was overwhelming, and so it was really exciting to see that. And we needed to be able to provide additional programming and to be able to provide academic space for that programming to blossom. And so now, as you already heard, we have 20 majors. There's talk of some more. And we were able to develop a Hunzi Hall, which isn't just a place for academics, but it's a place that really allows academics to thrive and to grow. So those are all the kind of pieces that when you think about developing a baccalaureate culture, that's just some of the things that have to happen. That's way more than even I thought about on the front end. I think everybody around the table probably wasn't thinking about. So how does that happen? How does all of that occur? You know, as a faculty member, which I was for many years, my life was really narrowly focused. I worried about my students, my class. I worried about a few of my colleagues. No, you know, you think about your world is fairly narrowly focused, and when I became president, I realized that this academic enterprise is a very different thing. It involves all kinds of people, all across campus, the community, beyond the community, and so it's way more than the individual components put together to make the sum. It's just much bigger than that. And so that was a very exciting thing. And so as all of these people started to be able to do what they needed to do to make this enterprise move forward, that was really terribly exciting. I'm sure a number of us have heard over the years that good things happen when good folks are able to get around the table. And I've been very blessed to be able to sit around a table of some really outstanding people on this campus, in this community, beyond. That's where the energy comes from, to be able to hear some of those things that others have. And yeah, you know, Steve already alluded to it, we don't always agree on things, but to get those ideas out there and to see what you can really do and to get the energy going, that's the exciting part about being in higher education and moving things forward. And so that's been the most rewarding thing for me, is to be able to sit around the table with those great people and to share those ideas and to see what might happen and then actually see that it does come to pass. I've already alluded to a couple of them. We've got 20 majors, we had a successful capital campaign, Hunzi Hall, things like that. All those things happen because good people were able to sit around the table and come up with some really good ideas. One of the first things that I heard when I came to campus was, we don't really have a track record. How are we going to encourage prospective students and the families to send kids here? We've gone through a couple of graduations, but you know, they're really not in the job market much. They're just barely, we're talking about graduate school admissions, things like that. So we don't have any kind of a track record. Looking back now, it's really interesting to see what's happened. So we did a survey institutionally of all of the graduates, the baccalaureate graduates. We did that a year ago. And what we found, a couple important things, I think. One is that within 6 months, basically everybody found a job. Now, is it the ideal job? I don't know how many of you got your ideal job out of the chute. But that's not the point. They're employed. And those numbers compare very, very favorably with schools that have been at this for many, many years. The other one, which is really interesting, I think, is that 90% of our graduates that are interested in going into graduate school got into their first choice. Let me just say that one more time. 90% got into their first choice, not second or third, but their first choice. That really speaks not just to their native ability, but to what happens here on this campus. That's some of the exciting things that I've been able to see during this time. And so I want to thank those people who have sat around the table over the years. And that would include faculty, staff, the cabinet, community members, folks in the Minnesota Private College Council that gave me the opportunity to go to China on this interesting trip 11, 12 years ago now and see what's happened there. All of those things, those are the good people that sit around the table and have made things happen. The other interesting thing was also mentioned here already this evening is that we didn't just develop programs, we did it in a very deliberate way, and that is so that we stayed focused on what you see right behind you here, the one thing needful. This is the portrait that Bill did that depicts Jesus talking with Mary and Martha, his good friends, in the city of Bethany. And how Mary is sitting listening to Jesus for the day, and Martha's getting ready for dinner, and she says to Jesus, you know, why doesn't Mary get with the program? And then Jesus tells her, you should do like Mary and stay focused on the one thing needful. And so you've heard this multiple times. I hear this day in and day out on campus. I mean, it's not just something that we say, it's something that we live and breathe. It was already alluded to when people come to evaluate, strangers come to campus and evaluate what we do here, they pick up on that right away. So all of this programming is done and focused on that, so that we maintain that as the foundation of what we do here as a Christian, Lutheran Christian liberal arts institution. And I'm confident that my experience here with all of you is going to be no different for Gene when he comes, when Gene Pfeiffer arrives on campus here in a couple of weeks, that you'll support him in the same way that you've supported me, and that you're going to be able to move this place even to a higher level. And so that's what I think is really exciting as we move forward. I'm not going to make any personal thank yous except for one, and that's to my wife, Kathy. Kathy and I have been in higher ed together now for many, many years. We've served as our own editors. We bounce ideas off each other. And so a lot of that came with us then as we came to campus, and that was very, very helpful to me. She also told me a lot of times when I was thinking some really stupid stuff, and so that was really helpful as well. But seriously, having her alongside me has made all the difference in the world, and so I've really appreciated that, and it's going to be a new world for us here in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have to make breakfast for us every day now. I like doing that, but I haven't had to do it, so that'll be a whole different deal. But so anyways, again, thank you, Kathy, for the support that you've given me all these years, and I've took you away 12 and a half years ago from a growing professional career, and you've supported the work that we've done here. So, in conclusion, let me just share one word of scripture with you. I shared this with the graduates at commencement this year, and it's a passage from Philippians. And Paul says this to the church in Philippi, and he says this, "And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus." What a tremendous promise for us to be able to lay hold of here on this campus at Bethany Lutheran College and personally. That's for all of us. And so that's what I want to leave with you, is that reminder, that promise that's held out to all of us, and that God will continue to bless this place as he sees fit, as long as we remain faithful to what he wants us to do here. So as you leave this evening, whether your travels take you near or far, we pray that you have safe travel plans. And when we get done here this evening, we're going to have a little bit of food. Hopefully it's not cold yet, but we'll have a little bit of food afterwards. But you're all invited, those of you that are interested, to come on over to, except for Art, you can't yet. Come over to 128 West Glencrest. We'd be happy to visit some more this evening. And so I don't think I've got any appointments in the morning, so we can enjoy that. So again, thank you all for everything you do for the college. It's a great opportunity. It's great for us to be able to get together and celebrate Bethany. And it just happens to be that I'm retiring now, but it really is an opportunity for us to celebrate everything that we all get to do here on this campus. So thank you.
I had a number of things that I was going to say about Dan, but I don't think I have to say them after you just listened to him. I mean, it was pretty evident. And I think it's really a marvelous tribute to Dan with the audience that is here tonight. Community leaders, faculty, staff, community members, college presidents, people from the Minnesota Private College Conference, and it's really obvious the impact that Dan has had in so many different circles during his presidency at Bethany, and that has certainly enhanced what we do here on campus, his involvement outside of our campus as well as what he's done on the campus, which I just think is a tremendous attribute. Early on I jokingly said, it's about me. It's clearly never been about Dan. Thank you. We're going to do a little final thing. Chaplain Molstead will lead us in a prayer. We have Dan's favorite hymn, and then I'll have some brief instructions so that you can get to the food. Chaplain Molstead.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I owe Dan a debt of thanks also for adding to my wardrobe. When I first came here 10 years ago, you had just returned from a trip from China, and you brought a tie for each one of the board members. And since I was the newest on the board, I thought, well, I'll let everybody else pick first. So I just want to personally thank you for that pink dragon tie. It was really nice. So I don't know, Art, do we find out tonight you're leaving the lawnmower to talk to people? What? Man. I don't want anybody to leave with a bad impression of Art. I mean, seriously, talk to his parole officer. He's the nicest guy. Let's conclude tonight with a prayer, and this will also include the prayer for our meal. And then following that, we're going to sing a hymn verse together. Let us join our hearts in prayer. Lord God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for providing us with this Christian college where men and women are trained in the truths of your saving word, especially in the knowledge of your Son, Jesus Christ, and in productive Christian vocations. This evening, we express our gratitude for the work you have carried out through the talents and abilities of your servant, Dan Bruss. May the faith you have worked in his heart continue to be present in those who teach and govern at this institution. As Dan now begins his new stage in his life, we pray that your hand of blessing would rest upon him and his wife, Kathy. According to your will, grant them many years of joy together in your grace. We pray that you would be present now in our conversations and bless the food you have given us to eat. We ask it all through the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, who has gone to the cross to atone for all of our sins and has risen again from the dead, that by faith in him we may have everlasting life. Amen. So Professor Marzoff is at the organ tonight, our beautiful organ. If you've ever turned around to look at that, it's a good time to see it. But Professor Marzoff, Dennis Marzoff, is going to lead us in our hymn. If you'd take out your hymn book, and I don't have one with me on me, hear me. I believe it's 593, is that correct, Dennis? 593, turn to hymn 593. This has kind of become the anthem for Bethany's choir through the decades. And quite often we sing this at the end of services. And I know at graduation, Dan will often come down and take his hat off and stand and sing. I remember doing that recently it must have been this last graduation, and one of the students looked over. They were so surprised to get to sing right next to President Bruss. So, but one of his favorites as well. So let's join together in singing that hymn.